Hi, everybody. My name is Jordan Bricker, and this is my research proposal titled The Effects of Inclusive Physical Activity Program on Stress, Anxiety, and Depression in Young Adults with Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD. As an overview for this presentation, we will go over what ASD is, the health disparities that often occur alongside ASD, physical activity levels in the ASD community, the benefits of physical activity in this population, what inclusive activity is, and the benefits of that as well. We will then discuss the research methods, procedures, data analysis that will be used for the proposed study. After establishing the framework of the study, we will discuss the purpose and hypothesis and end with clinical implications and future research. Now let's get to it. Transitioning to adulthood can be a difficult part of life. Leaving for college or starting a new job can be very demanding and may lead to stress, anxiety, and even depression. Throughout multiple recent studies, stress, anxiety, and depression are more prevalent in adults than in children, and even more prevalent in individuals with ASD. Young adults with ASD may experience even more of a struggle with this transition because of the traits associated with the disorder. According to the American Psychiatric Association, trademark characteristics of ASD include difficulties with social interactions and communication, sensory regulation issues, limited movements, limited interest in activities, and uncontrollable repetitive movements and behaviors. Some examples include, maybe you've seen it in someone with ASD before, flapping of the hands, jumping or bouncing, trouble controlling speech, only liking certain foods, trouble with eye contact. All of these aspects of ASD diagnosis make it difficult for individuals with ASD to navigate their daily lives, and their needs to regulate these symptoms need to be addressed. These traits can often lead to mental health disparities and decreases in quality of life in this population. A systematic review by Holix and colleagues looked at 30 studies based on depression and 29 studies based on anxiety in adults with ASD and found that the lifetime prevalence for anxiety disorders in this population was 42%, and for depressive disorders, 37%, whereas estimates of these disorders in the general public are about 1 to 12%. This study, along with a meta-analysis by Pezzamenti that had similar findings, also established that the prevalence of depression and anxiety in individuals with ASD increases with age. In another study by Ham and Yoon, the quality of life of young adults with ASD were compared to their typically developed peers. The presence of ASD was significantly linked to lower levels of quality of life, with psychological well-being being the lowest met domain. This study examined 130 young adults with ASD and compared them to their typically developed peers using the World Health Organization's Quality of Life Questionnaire. Some recent literature was also found on the prevalence of stress in this population. In a study by Bishop Fitzpatrick and his colleagues, it was found that adults with ASD showed higher levels of stress than their age-matched typically developed peers. Bishop went further to address the link between perceived stress and the quality of life. The researchers found that the participants who reported higher levels of perceived stress had lower health-related quality of life. Woodard and his colleagues used the stress survey schedule to assess stress in children aged 6 to 12 and found that children with ASD had significantly higher levels of perceived stress, and that the stress may be linked to the characteristics of ASD. Young adults with ASD also show lower levels of physical activity, or PA. A review of 30 studies by Sharon and her colleagues found that individuals with ASD are less physically active than their typically developed peers, and the incidence of sedentary lifestyle increases with age. A study by Hillier and her colleagues compared 30 young adults with ASD to 30 peers, confirming that this population is less likely to be active in their daily lives than their peers. The before mentioned observational study by Ham and Yoon also had similar findings. Hillier also found that young adults with ASD are less motivated to engage in PA, have less intent to engage in it, and have more perceived barriers to it. Barriers include lack of resources, less opportunities, poor motor skills, behavior problems, and social disparities. With all of these traits limiting physical activity, regular physical activity programs might not be enough. We need a solution. We all know the physical benefits of physical activity, or PA, in general: weight loss, cardiovascular health, flexibility. but there are many psychological benefits that come along with being more physically active. Here are some of the psychological benefits of PA, specifically in young adults with ASD. The before mentioned study by Ham and Yoon also showed that higher levels of PA are correlated to a better quality of life in this population. That study has a tremendous depth and has very meaningful findings. Another study by Garcia and colleagues found that a 10-month walking program increased psychological well-being in this population. In a qualitative photo voice study by First and colleagues, PA was identified as a way for young adults with ASD to cope with stress. Photo voice is a study design that gives participants cameras to take pictures of their experience and write about them. And finally, a systematic review of 40 studies by Reindeers and her colleagues established that higher levels of PA were associated with increased levels of social functioning. On top of that, a 48-week physical activity intervention by Toscano and her colleagues found increases in social skills, specifically a decrease in detrimental social behaviors. This leads me to an important question. Since physical activity is so beneficial, but there are a lack of resources and multiple barriers to participation for this population, what can we do to help young adults with ASD become more physically active? One of the ways to increase physical activity levels in this population is the use of inclusive physical activity, which will be referred to as IPA. IPA involves including typically developed peers in exercise programs for individuals with disabilities. Often these programs are offered in schools for children, along with physical activity and therapeutic resources, which are available and often government funded for individuals with disabilities. But these benefits become decreasingly available as an individual transitions to early adulthood. As we have established before, ASD does not stop at a certain age, and the complications that come along with it actually continue to increase as age increases. Adults with unique abilities deserve just as much support as they transition to adulthood and beyond. Since individuals with ASD have so many barriers to physical activity, and regular exercise programs might not meet their needs, the proposed solution is to create an inclusive learning environment to effectively give way to a more active lifestyle for these individuals. There are limited resources on the effectiveness of IPA programs in relation to young adults with ASD, but recent studies have shown some of the benefits in both children and young adults with ASD. Jazowski and Cermak examined the differences between exercising with a partner and exercising alone, and found that participants who exercised with a partner showed greater enjoyment of the activities and a lower rate of perceived exertion. This means the participants completed the same activities, but the ones who worked with a partner perceived it as less difficult. It was also shown by Margraf and Constantino that an inclusive running program decreased problem behaviors and increased social integration and exercise competency in children with ASD. Along with faster running times being recorded after the running intervention, interviews were conducted with the children's parents to find these behavioral and social benefits. This last study by Nalban showed improvement in social skills and a decrease in problematic behaviors in both children and adults who were involved in an IPA program at an inclusive fitness facility. All of these studies suggest that more measures should be taken to include individuals with ASD in physical activity programs, and that more research should be done regarding the benefits of inclusive physical activity. The purpose of this study will be to examine the effects of an IPA program on stress, anxiety, and depression in young adults with ASD. The hypothesis is that participation in such a program will lead to significant reductions in these aspects of mental health. This will be a case study at California State University, Northridge, or CSUN. Convenient sampling will be used to recruit 5 to 10 college students with ASD from the CSU system. Disability resource centers throughout the schools in the greater Los Angeles area will be contacted and given information about the program. Recruited participants will be CSU college students between the ages of 18 and 29 who have a diagnosis of ASD. Other inclusion criteria include the ability to follow verbal and written directions and to complete the required paperwork independently. Participants will be excluded if they have any diagnosis of intellectual disability, any musculoskeletal injuries, answered yes to any of the questions on the PAR-Q, or do not complete the consent form. After participant recruitment, the potential participants will complete a consent form, PAR-Q, and a demographics form. The consent form is an agreement to participate in the research study and a waiver of liability since exercise involves risk of injury. The PAR-Q is an exercise readiness questionnaire, and the demographics form will only be used to collect information about ASD diagnosis and age. The participants who were cleared to participate in the study will complete the DASS 21 and this at the start of the intervention. The intervention will be a 10-week IPA program called Into Fitness Together, or IFIT. And after the intervention, the DASS 21 will be re-administered and the data will be analyzed. The IFIT program will be designed as a 10-week intervention once a week for 60 minutes. The exercises will be designed by the researcher and implemented by peer mentors. The mentors will be kinesiology students who have knowledge in the field of kinesiology, have completed the required upper division core kinesiology classes, and who will train the participants and exercise alongside them. Peer mentors will undergo 2 60-minute training sessions by the researcher where they will learn the exercises, how to cue them, how to use the equipment, and how to interact with the participants as peer mentors. The goal here is to provide the participants with a high-quality exercise program that meets their specific needs. The peer mentors will be as age-matched as appropriately as possible, since convenience sampling will be used and the age range is 18 to 29. Since the program is inclusive, individuals without ASD will be allowed to participate, but will not be used in data collection and analysis. Along with having a peer mentor for support, exercising in an adaptive environment is also implemented in this program to increase the inclusive aspect of the program. All the exercises will be designed with progressions and regressions to ensure adaptability for each participant. As an operational definition for this study, a regression is a way to modify an exercise so that it still trains the same fitness component and uses the same muscle groups, but involves less coordination, skill, or strength to complete. The program is designed to start at a baseline level and progress over time. It will increase in intensity and difficulty each week, but all of the exercises will be open to regression. This adds to the inclusive component of the program and is intended to foster success and a feeling of accomplishment for the participants. Each session of IFIT will include a 5-minute group warm-up, which will consist of 10 exercises performed for 30 seconds each, utilizing all of the major muscle groups. The participants will then break into pairs with their peer mentors and complete a 15-minute strength and endurance circuit, a 15-minute cardio circuit, and a 15-minute balance and coordination circuit, which will also include 10 exercises, 30 seconds each, but will be performed 2 times through. Everyone will come together for the last 10 minutes to participate in a group flexibility session, which includes static stretches for the upper body and lower body and are either standing, seated, or on the floor. I'd like to briefly go over the components of fitness in this program. Muscular strength and endurance exercises will use exercise bands and light weights to add resistance to movements along with body weight exercises and core strengthening exercises. Cardiovascular endurance exercises will include body weight cardio exercises, running or practicing motor skills, and potentially some cardio equipment. Balance exercises in the program will involve adding in surface variation like a foam pad, changing the base of support like standing on one foot or one foot in front of the other, and dynamic movements that involve holding balance while moving. Flexibility exercises will include dynamic and static stretching, whether it be standing, seated, or on the floor. Now, these are not variables that are being measured, but they are the constructs of the program. You can imagine with all the characteristics that we discussed previously, increasing all of these components of fitness would greatly improve the daily lives of individuals with ASD. The program will be held in the weight training room at CSUN. Equipment will be provided for the exercises such as mats, medicine balls, resistance bands, and different surface variations. Exercises will include basic motor functions and utilize all of the major muscle groups for each session. It will also include the 4 components of fitness for each session, as previously discussed. The Depression, Anxiety, and Stress Scale, or DASS-21, will be used to measure levels of depression, anxiety, and stress before and after the intervention. The DASS-21 is a 21-question survey that determines depression, anxiety, and stress levels to be normal, mild, moderate, severe, or extremely severe. The levels of each domain are measured by proposed statements about emotional states within the past week. 21 statements are proposed, and the participants choose a level at which the statement applies to them. Each answer gives a specific score, 0 to 3, which each proposed statement is assigned to a specific domain, and the scores are then combined to establish a total score for each domain. Some examples of the statements in this survey include, I find it difficult to wind down, I couldn't seem to experience positive feelings, or I felt like I was using a lot of nervous energy. This scale has been determined by the creators to be reliable and valid for research purposes and clinical application in the general population. Woodard and colleagues has gone further to determine it valid and reliable in individuals with ASD. Jamovi's statistical analysis software will be used to analyze the data from the DASS-21, comparing pre and post-intervention scores with a paired t-test for the mean scores of each dependent variable, stress, anxiety, and depression. Although the scores are separated into categories, the raw scores are what will be analyzed. A Wilcoxon t-test will be used since the data will be non-parametric. We're hoping to see a significant reduction in scores for all 3 dependent variables for the group after the intervention with a confidence level of 95%. If a significant difference is found, Cohen's d will be used to determine the magnitude of the effect. If our hypothesis is correct and iFit decreases the presence of these emotional states, it will prove that it is an effective way to combat the mental health disparities associated with ASD. We hope that our findings shed light on the importance of inclusiveness, not only in regard to physical activity, but in the community as a whole. We would also like to encourage other researchers to examine the effectiveness of IPA on mental health, not only in individuals with ASD, but individuals of all different ages and abilities. Here are all of my references. And thank you so much for listening to my presentation. I hope I've portrayed the need for the research and the importance of implementing inclusive programs in our community. I look forward to answering your questions in class.